So good afternoon, everyone. Okay. So I welcome everyone for today's webinar. Especially, I want to make a note for the attendees who have joined us through YouTube. We will be conducting a question and answer session towards the end of the webinar. So you may, type in your question using the chat box on YouTube. And on your behalf, I will be directing those questions to our esteemed speakers. Another point to note is that we are also welcoming any sponsorship inquiries with regards to the webinar that we'll be conducting. And these webinars are scheduled for every week. So if you have any queries, you may direct them to Mr. Vivek Shastri. His email ID has been mentioned on the slide, which is visible. So once again, I welcome everyone to today's webinar. The topic is Economic Rebound Scenario, UV or W recovery curve, and the implications for businesses, consumers, and employees. So let's start with today's session. Okay, so as you all might be aware that Creating Values is conducting a series of webinars, and it is scheduled for every Friday between 4 p.m. to 5:30 p.m. And I'm thankful to all the attendees who have been joining us for it. However, now we are putting a twist, a flip on the webinars, and now we will be calling them as Qbinars. So what is Qbinars, you might think? So they are quarantine webinars. So we thought, why not have a fun angle to the standard webinar format that has been followed for years. And so from here on, Creating Values will be conducting Qbinar series for the quarantine times that we are in. Okay, so moving forward to our discussion today. Prior to that, I would want to draw your attention to our upcoming Qbinar, which is scheduled for 8th of May at 4 p.m. The discussion topic will be boost your CHRO and CIO partnership to succeed in challenging times. HR and IT professionals as well as business leaders are welcome to attend this webinar, as the discussion is quite core for the functioning of all business operations in these difficult times. So please make a note of it that it will be on 8th of May at 4 p.m. That is boost your CHRO and CIO partnership to succeed in challenging times. Now moving to today's discussion. So I would, just a brief introduction of myself, only the name and designation that I would mention. I'm Sujata Sa, the Associate Director at Creating Values. I welcome our esteemed speakers. They'll be sharing with us some expert views with respect to the possible pattern of economic recovery and its implications on varied stakeholders. The session is formatted as a panel discussion, and our moderator is Mr. Anshul Dureja, MD and CEO of Creating Values. We have with us Mr. Avinder Singh, MD and CEO of Osram Lighting India. Osram is a German multinational lighting manufacturer. The company is a pioneer of innovative products in general lighting, automotive lighting, photo optics, etc. Our next speaker is Mr. Rajiv Dhar, who's the CEO of NIF. National Investment and Infrastructure Fund is India's first sovereign wealth fund that was set up by the Government of India. I now request Mr. Anshul Dureja to briefly set the context for today's discussion and share his views on the same prior to posing some focused questions for our speakers. Over to you, Mr. Anshul.
Thank you, Sujata. It's really great to be back again, and it's great because we are doing these webinars and Qbinars, as we call them, every week now. So every Friday we have a distinguished panel who's coming over, and we are getting a great amount of glimpses of the wealth of the wisdom they bring with them. So we are very, very happy and pleased to have Mr. Avinder and Mr. Rajiv over here with us today, and we look forward to have a lot of discussions. But before I start moderating on the panel, I would share some of the pieces which I feel are very pertinent in the times to come, and what sort of pieces we are seeing. These typically are a very, this particular phase which we are going forward. This is a very difficult and unpredictable times we are living in. Nobody could have predicted that this COVID would probably jeopardize the entire plans of organization, of businesses, of employees, of consumers. But the reality is, whatever be the lockdown status, this seems to be far from over. We would still be living into the scenarios of a social distancing. It would be a new normal for us. Probably, if not for years, but at least for quarters. So for probably 1, 2, 3, 4, I really don't know. Nobody could peg anything, but this is something these reals would continue to be with us. And as I speak to various corporate leaders and business leaders in my community, in my circle of influence, there are four broad pieces. I just try to encapsulate them into four broad pieces of what they are doing right now and what could be probably a food of thought for some of you who are wondering what new they can do. So I would just share with you four broad pieces. The first is they are doing a lot of innovation in new diversification. So probably they are, if they were doing A, so now they are looking at innovating in something which is A plus, or probably something which is new, which is could be a B altogether. So a lot of stress is now getting into innovations. The first week after the lockdown was something, it was being okay, let's see what happens. Another couple of weeks, there was some level of anxiety, but I think the pieces are very, very different. So companies are doing a lot of innovations. They are looking at it. They are also looking at investing in future technologies, in sunrise technologies, as we call as a technocrats. So a lot of companies are now looking at people independent applications, like focus more on in terms of AI and ML. Now, this is also probably a dreaded piece, but this is also an opportunity because this would lead to a lot of reskilling of the talent which is internally into the organization. This is probably the first piece I am picking up after speaking to many corporate czars. The second is the organizations are also looking at in terms of doing a lot of work on manpower optimization and job evaluation. I think gone are the days wherein we had probably, I would say long lasting employees, which is good, but probably the meritocracy is something which is coming to the fore. I would be posing some questions to both Avinder and Rajiv on this aspect, but manpower optimization is something which the organizations are really, really keen to explore as of now. The third piece is in terms of the employee engagement management. There's a lot of focus which is coming on. Organizations have learned a reality that this lockdown is going to stay with us for at least some time now, at least in the metro spaces. So what do they do to engage, to make the organization employees more productive, more engaged? How do they do this virtual employee engagement? So we are seeing a lot of rise in terms of acceptability and probably exploring by organization on these tools. The last point I am able to see is in terms of that, and probably I think we have a great panel to talk about this. In corporate world, when we talk about governance, when we talk about the business models, I think something which I have seen very closely and we have also followed it is the PSPD, profitability, sustainability, predictability, and de-risk. I wonder which organization was able to predict it earlier. I really don't know. Profitability, sustainability, yes, profitability would continue for some organization and probably it would recover also. Sustainability is a bigger threat. Predictability has gone for a toss, and probably the de-risking is something which is going to drive a good amount of investments going forward by the organization. And one of the core pieces I think we are able to, we would be seeing that is in terms of the cyber security aspects. So a lot of information flow is happening across between the organization, across organizations by machines which are being worked for in the home environment for both personal and corporate needs. So how do you de-risk your businesses? So these probably are the top 4-5 pieces I have been able to talk and probably sync up with people and get more information. But this all is dependent on how fast the economy recovery really happens. So I think before wasting more time, I would like to welcome both Avinder and Rajiv once again to really, I would say, take this session to a real up. So how we would be doing this panel moderation is very simple. I would be playing the role of a devil's advocate and ask some pertinent questions to both Avinder and Rajiv and try to make their lives difficult by posing some difficult questions. Let's see how well they are able to answer, but I'm sure they would be doing a good justice. And then you may parallelly on the YouTube channel, you can keep on asking questions. And my colleague Sujata would take up some of these questions and come back to you at the end. She would take up some of the questions on your behalf, and then she could ask at the end to both Rajiv and Avinder. Let's start. Avinder, my first question is to you. It's as I shared. I think it's a very difficult times. Nobody could have predicted it. But what learnings businesses have to take post this scenario? Probably short term there would be impact, but what are the learnings for businesses in the medium to long term scenario? So probably starting with Avinder first, and then Rajiv, if you could answer once he is able to share his views.
Thank you, Anshu, for giving the background. And I think uh, in today's time, the University of WhatsApp would have given so much information to each and everybody in our country that probably everybody is an expert. You really don't need experts these days because everybody knows everything. So with this baseline, I would also like to thank you that even though there aren't many cases where you thank people who make your life difficult, as you said, you would like to make it, but still thank you for that. So when you say this pandemic probably is something which does not have any parallel in the known economy. Somebody could be talking about the Spanish flu, which happened 100 years ago when so many casualties would have happened, but 100 years is a couple of generations. So these days people aren't aware. So there is no parallel. So anything and everything what is happening is new. We do not know, or we were not prepared for this kind of a pandemic, even though in the advanced economies, people did thought about this. But I think since it never happened for quite some time, they never prepared for it. Whatever had happened was in bits and pieces, getting, confined to a particular area, but really becoming an epidemic, becoming a pandemic, people would have seen it now. So when you say that what changes now, perhaps you touched it right. All aspects of human life, the social, the economical, the organizational, everything changes. There is a new normal. Nobody would have thought that a perquisite like working from home or an advantage like working from home will become a new normal. And this, I'm sure, is not going to go anywhere. This is going to stay. And this is going to have a lot of impact on other industries which were thriving on the offices. We can talk about it as we go along. I think when I say the social distancing will be the new norm. There is nothing going to change even after a month, 2 months, 3 months. I think the fear cycles, what we are in, we would be now, practicing social distancing. And from that, a new word has been coined, which I heard very recently, was distant socializing. So probably the socializing would happen, but in a very distant manner, which would be very virtual. You don't need to be getting close, and the hugs and the shake hands and all that stuff is going to go. Meeting your customers often over drinks and tea and XYZ is going to go down dramatically and drastically. When another thing which I believe would change is the entire supply chain across the globe is going to change, be it in India or across. I don't think we are going to see those kind of stuff ever again, which we have been experiencing. You also rightly said, I would like to agree that digitization, which until yesterday was used by many of the organizations to stay ahead of the curve, will now become need of the hour. People will have to invest and get into digitization as early as possible, because there would not be any way out unless they get into digitization, which would have to be done with a lot of empathy, be it be the chatbots, or be it be the live chat, or be it be the Zooms, and be it be the Skypes, probably would be the new normal. All those conferences, all those meets, and all those stuff is going to be replaced by virtual connectivity. These are some of the very quick things which I believe is going to change. The consumption pattern is going to change, be it be the automotives, or be it be your dining facilities, be it be your cinemas, be it your socializing, perhaps you name it, and things are going to change. Life is not going to be what it was. Probably everybody would have read it by now. There would be a life which would be before Corona, and there'll be something after Corona, which everybody would have learned it by now. So as we go along, perhaps we can touch more stuff, but I don't see anything which is going to be same what it was prior to February. It's going to be something absolutely new. Some of it we can think about it, and some of it we will have to get into once we restart and open and come out of the lockdown.
I totally agree with you. In fact, there would be industry by industry scenarios which would keep on emerging. And as you said, in terms of social distancing, I think there's another term which is coming nowadays is virtual distancing. So I would share as we move ahead, but over to you, Rajiv, and what is your thought process in terms of the times and the lives we are about to see a change for?
So first of all, thank you, Anshul. Great that this Qbinar is reaching out to so many people. Thank you, Sujata, and thank you very much, Arun, that you have created this platform to exchange ideas and try to figure out as to what is best for all of us. So from our perspective, especially from my personal perspective, I think the learnings with respect to the businesses post-COVID, and I don't know what is post-COVID, because that definition is still not very clear. But assuming that post-COVID means that we now know that it is there, and obviously every economy or country will have their different post-COVID scenarios. But from our perspective, or my perspective, I think the learnings which are very important for all of us as individuals, or as organizations, or even as countries, is to learn to very quickly, maybe I will say in 3 words, is prediction, adaptability, and resilience. So earlier we used to have annual budgets, and we would predict based on everything is fine, or it's some kind of a linear curve, and we had a great sense of what will happen in next 12 months, and we would divide this into quarterly budgets, but there was a general sense that this is what is going to happen. I think COVID has given us a kind of a jolt, which basically says that every day is important, and all businesses have to learn to be much, much better on predictability, which basically means that businesses now need to create scenarios and test the assumptions on daily is not the right word, but at very, very short notices, because we don't know what will happen tomorrow, what will happen next week, and it's very important that all the organizations create necessary tools to have much better sense on the predictability. The second is the adaptability. Given what is happening around us, we should not really lose focus, because it needs to be clear in our mind that whatever comes in front of us, we need to adapt very quickly, and then figure out the ways and means to make sure that our business models are adaptive and adapt for some kind of uncertainty. And as you, Anshul, pointed out, basically, when you talked about the de-risking, and also you talked very briefly about the predictability. And the third is the resilience. In my view, we need to have organizations which need to be resilient, but we also need to have people who are resilient, which basically means a cultural shift. And many companies have resilience as a cultural anchor, but the cultural aspects with respect to resilience need to be really honed up within the organization, which basically means that as we navigate through these crises, we need to basically learn these new stuff, but then also go the offensive way to address what, how, and who, and then start retooling ourselves, which basically means new operating models, just lay out a bold cost restructuring or rationalization plan, productivity increases, given that, as you know, we discussed that work from home is something which is going to happen. The second is customer, and I would call this as customer 2.0, where your connect with the customer is now going to be virtual or semi-virtual. And how do we then engage with the customer, which basically means how do we accelerate our e-commerce program, redesign our customer engagements, and different businesses and kind of segments will have different kind of retooling to be done, but that needs to be done very quickly. And finally, once we have to some extent understood all these things, is to accelerate out of downturn. And in which case governments have to play a very important role in policy making and fiscal stimulus, monetary, support and all that stuff, which is all fine, and all our governments are quite capable enough of doing it. But we as businesses also need to have a very good plan to come out of downturn. Faster you come, better it is, which basically means we need to secure lifelines ASAP as far as the businesses are concerned. So I just want to end with one very simple paradigm or a thought process we have, is that it's very difficult to build businesses. And it is very easy to, if you lose focus, it's very easy to lose business. And once a business is lost or an enterprise is lost, it is very difficult to what you call as bring it back to life. And I think it is very important for all industry captains and management and to make sure that businesses remain as a going concern, which basically means it has enough cash to support itself during this uncertain period. So I think these are the learnings which will happen around post-COVID, around mid-COVID kind of scenario. But sooner the businesses understand this, the better it is.
Thanks, Rajiv. I think you really, I would say, try to share these with the 3 points. I really like the predictability point a lot, because I think that is more closer to my heart in terms of being an entrepreneur myself. So what is your personal, I would say, thought process in terms of where the Indian economy is going to have a recovery? And will it be a U that is a staggered period of a pause button and then it would keep on growing and probably it would be a curvature, or it would be a sharp V? Or will it probably we would also have, as you said, nobody can have a post-COVID scenario, but probably we are also listening a lot in terms of the W, that probably around the winters, the COVID could come back again. So what sort of a recovery cycle in your view probably you are able to see?
So I don't know. So that's an easy way to say. But having said that, you see, I look at the economy in different from a different perspective. India is a large country. It has so many states. And I think each state or businesses will have what you call as different recovery models. So for example, if you are in a drug and a pharmaceutical industry, the impact with respect to COVID is moderate and the recovery period is short term. But if you're in automotive business, then the impact is high. And in my view, recovery would be long term. If you're in entertainment, the impact is severe and the recovery is long term. So while, it's easy to say, jump to some final conclusion, I would call that way. I would say each industry or each segment has its own challenges. But sooner we realize and try to divide our challenges into smaller problems and then address those sort of smaller problems, then it would be easier to solve the problem. I can understand that to many industries, so for example, logistics, severe, but recovery could be medium term. Similarly, textiles, moderate and short term. So It all depends on where you are. My view is that when it comes to the overall Indian economy, answer, I don't know. Um, it all depends on how, our next 2-3 months, what is the policy, fiscal, monetary, financial support the government is providing or will provide. But I would assume that we have very smart people who at the government and at the decision making body, and they will be able to give necessary impetus to the economy to make sure that we do not live in the uncertain period and uncertain. See, at the end of the day, all businessmen want a certainty with respect to the policy framework and its implementation. So I think if that is happening, then industries and captains of industries will be able to figure out the way out. Human beings have a very good way of survival. They can survive. We have survived, economies have survived post World War II, economies have survived, as Avinder said, after Spanish flu, they will also survive. They survived after, the financial crisis in 2008, 2009, and they came back and did so well. I wish and I hope that it would be we, but at this point of time, jury's out.
So, really like your argument in terms of it would be across the industry and not as a industry in a total. So various sectors would see various form of recovery. But just to add to the last point you said, Rajiv, in terms of the world has seen world wars and Spanish flu. The problem is that the world has seen, the generations hasn't seen. And the 2008 seems to be too minuscule a recession of what we are staring at it right now. But let me move to Avinder. And Avinder, if you could share your point of thought in terms of the recoveries. What do you see? Do you also see sector by sector, Rajiv?
No, definitely. I think I agree with Rajiv, what he said, that there is going to be different recoveries in different economies, different countries, different sectors. But having said that, let me add my perspective to it. When we went into COVID, we were already into a slowdown. And our condition as compared to the world was already very bad. I would say whatever the papers or whatever the numbers say, but the ground reality was that some of our sectors like automotive and housing and infra and power, they were already in doldrums. Since we went really bad into the COVID, so I would believe that the recovery would be even difficult. When we went into COVID, we were already struggling with NPAs, which were as high as 12%. Unemployment was as high as 20%, I would say. And businesses were not doing so well. Automotive sector per se was carrying huge inventories, and a lot of dealers and showrooms were getting closed. Banks were having skyrocket, sky-high NPAs. There were a lot of stress on the micro, small, medium enterprises. So probably we were already in deep trouble when we went into COVID. Now, when we say the human race has survived all the epidemics, pandemics, world wars, probably we never saw a complete lockdown. Be it be the world wars, be it be any other financial stress we would have seen, economy never stopped. In India, per se, everything is halted. 6 weeks of no economic activity. There is no parallel in the world or in the history where companies have recorded zero revenue for the month of April. So this is different. So since this is different, so I believe the predictability of a VW or a U or perhaps a L is really unpredictable. But if you see the factors leading to it, extremely high job losses, perhaps I read somewhere already in the unorganized and entrepreneur side, we would have lost nearly 100 million jobs. We have 200 million over there. Out of that, 100 million have lost. That's the numbers which are coming out. NPAs and the kind of retail sector, I believe from 12% easily can go to 20%. That'll be a catastrophe. I also believe that there is going to be not only a breach of fiscal deficit, maybe a blow-up, which will be required to sustain this kind of a structure. And there is then no vaccination for next 12 months. So perhaps a W is already on the horizon. If you have a vaccination, probably you can talk about a U or a L or a V, but perhaps here a W is also a possibility. If you ask me, my personal perspective is we are going to see a negative growth world as well as India. People have already started predicting a 0 or a 0.1 or a 1% or a 0.5%, but I believe that also does not look to be possible. If we go beyond the way we are going to until 6 weeks, we can easily get into a negative. So probably the chances are that there could be a mix of a W or a L in which the bottom side of the L could be little moving towards top to depending on the fiscal stimulus, the help the government gives, the credit lines, the recovery period we make, and the resilience people show. It'll be somewhere between that, but things are not going to be easy. They're going to be really tough, and we will have to get into it to know what's happening. And for that, the time has come that we must get out of the lockdown. Because if we do not do it now, then perhaps there would be more unrest, there could be more social unrest, there could be more deaths, there could be more hunger in the country than what we are talking about, through 1,000 people or 30,000 infected. And what Mr. Narayan Murthy said a couple of days ago, I totally agree with him that close to 9 million people die in this country, on an annual basis. And everything was going on. Today we are talking about 1,000 or maybe 1,200 people, but everything is locked down. It is the time to open up. We can promote the able-bodied guys to get into the job. We can adapt coronavirus as the new normal and go in for all the hygiene factors which we need to take care of, like any other disease. And we must, take care of the elderly people or the young guys, but things should start moving now. A complete unlock should happen, because the way they have unlocked it now, it is a disaster. Supply chains don't work in red, green, and orange zones. I myself can tell you that my customers have got permission to open up their plants, but I have not got permission to give material to them, because some of my warehouses or my big warehouses are in red zone, and I'm going from pillar to post to convince them that unless I complete the supply chain of my customer, nothing is going to move. But perhaps the ground realities are a little different than what is in the paper. So we really have to take care of all these things.
I agree. I think the supply chain is a big issue. I certainly agree with you. And it's since it's connected to ancillary units a lot, since it's connected to, I would say, large, small, medium, all level of manufacturing units, I would say this itself is a catastrophe. But let's talk something about the hope perspective. Considering the lockdowns are over, Avinder, so, and probably what do we really need to have a V? And V is the best possible scenario we can probably today think of. I'm an optimistic person, so this is something from my side. How fast or what all the government can do, probably some 3 to 5 steps quickly in terms of your view, how to have a V recovery once the lockdown is over? What should the government do?
Anshul, howsoever optimistic I may be, but from an Indian economy perspective, I do not see a V. So my perspective is that probably we are looking at a V, or at best an L, which the bottom would be inverted a little bit upside. But even for that, I think we quickly need to go in for fiscal stimulus, blowing up the fiscal deficit, specifically for the micro and small enterprises. We must give or extend credit lines to the businesses very quickly and without having get into the bureaucracy about it. We must help the industries to quickly turn around by giving them, making them out of the lockdown as early as possible. I also would believe that the government helps to create, more opportunities for the people to be employed, which means that they should not stop the government spending, which a lot of people are talking about, that they would only be focusing on health. I think that will not be the right thing. They should continue to do what they were doing, whether through energy saving schemes or whether through smart cities. The focus must continue over there. And I also believe that individual organizations must adapt to the new normal as quickly and with a lot of flexibility as possible, so that we should turn this adversity into various other opportunities and look and help to make this, coming down of the economy, at least a U, or maybe a little better an L, but definitely howsoever optimistic I may be, but the ground realities doesn't allow me to think about V-shaped recovery, at least in India. I can't hear you.
Rajiv, thank you, Avinder. Rajiv, Avinder is not very optimistic in terms of a week. So are you?
No,
and in terms of sector to sector.
So I somewhat agree with Avinder. I really don't. So I agree with him that he is. I think it's a difficult proposition given where we are when we started and what a damage it has done to the economy. So I fully agree with. And I'm also not too much enamored by the end result. I think what we need to do is today is more important. So government actually has an enormous responsibility and obligation in terms of providing capital, both resources means in terms of credits and also making sure that the human capital, there's so much of migration which is happening, reverse migration is happening, and that creates tremendous amount of pressure on various sectors, specifically in towns and cities. So they need to have policies which are fair and would reward organizations who behave properly. They need to create innovative credit mechanism. I think Avinder has already covered it, but I'm just reiterating. An innovative credit mechanism is made available to all of them. And recently, for example, they're doing in bits and pieces. We have not seen. So Mr. Gadkari announced a 10,000 crore fund of fund MSME. And these are some of the steps they are taking. I think there's something more is coming. But government can do a lot of innovations. For example, just today, government owes so much of money to private sector and contractors and service providers, and I'm sure a lot of companies. And I think without questions being asked, they should pay up immediately, so that it frees up the credit and the cash issues of many of the organizations, including their employees and everybody. So no questions asked, pay up immediately. Secondly, it could accept a responsibility of first loss for incremental credit based on proper end use through a good, governance mechanism. And the idea is to ultimately create an environment for, organizations to survive. So, for example, real estate, construction industry, and there are a lot of companies who employ thousands and thousands of people. How do we, provide them capital for next 1 year, working capital? And government says, I will bear the first loss, and subject to one condition, that the use is that the amounts are put to best use. These are some of the things. So what Avinder was talking about, the overall fiscal stimulus. How do we make sure that, okay, maybe this is India has done a lot of what you call as innovation, and also when it comes to rationalization of the laws during such periods, like when Manmohan Singh was the finance secretary, he did a lot of stuff in '91 because we were our backs were at were really much. There was too much of kind of financial stress. Maybe a lot of reforms can now take place right away, and that would help the organizations and companies to do better. But I fully agree that this is a very difficult situation, and the ground level, there's a lot of unemployment, and government needs to put money in the pockets of people so that they're able to spend. They should also empower civil societies, NGOs, and give them money, credible NGOs, to give them money to ultimately make sure that if some of the Jan Dhan Yojanas and other stuff are not working, but at least from a food, and nobody should in this country die of hunger. So these are the stuff. So credit, releasing people, all contractors' payments, all these stuff needs to be done on yesterday's basis.
We had 3 sections. So as of now, we have only completed one, which is the business. I would quickly have just a couple of more questions on the consumer side. Something, Avinder, you also picked up early was in terms of digital experiences. So how digitization is going to happen?
Consumers, I think extravagant and luxury is going to take a backseat for quite some time. It is going to be the minimization and just for survival kind of a stuff which is going to be in the forefront. That's what I believe, that with this kind of an environment where people may not have jobs or would be laid off, or could be job or salary cuts or something like that for some time to come. And another thing which I am only digressing to put it in the perspective what Rajiv said, that the migrant labor which has gone back, for luring them to come back and then starting everything, the whole thing is not going to be happening tomorrow morning. So this is going to be a real issue. Consumption is, as I said, when we went into the lockdown, we were already having issues on the demand side of the supply chain. Now even supply side is going to be affected, but demand side was already an issue, but now it's going to be a bigger issue. So minimization is going to be, money or value for money is going to be something which will be at the top of everybody's mind. Now whether you take this value for money into the automotive sector, I believe that probably there'll be, people would be looking at cars which give them value for money, high brand, reliability stuff would be focused. Extravagant and big cars are going to take a backseat. You put them into the hotel and hospitality industry, probably things like OYOs and all that stuff is going to be the new norm, and this is going to get a hit. Spending would be limited, so probably you will have to choose where you want to spend. So on the consumer side, I see that the housing industry is going to take another hit, which was already in doldrums for a few years. It's not going to come up very soon again. Again, from the consumption pattern, I see work from home, as I earlier also said, would going to be the new norm. It's not going to be something which is going to be temporary. It will have a lot of impact on the reality industry, where already we heard that the TCS has announced 25% by 25. They have already put it in the open that they would like to keep only 25% of their workforce into offices by year 25, which means we are talking of lakhs and lakhs of people. So how much space is going to be, vacated, and all those guys are going to work from home. So the taste of the, consumers is going to change. So something like these big malls and this shopping complexes are going to be changed more into online shopping. So there could be a huge shift into platforms like Grofers and X and Y and Z. So I see that there is going to be a paradigm shift. What was happening in a very small way will become the new norm, and what was happening in a big way will then turn into a small way. And minimization, I would say, value for money. Think before you spend, and then probably this is going to be the flavor of the consumers. That's immediately what comes to my mind.
In fact, when you touched upon the topic of the migrant labor, that they are not going to come tomorrow, that's not going to happen. In fact, some of the news which I am getting, and probably some of the media has also reported that in the clusters which are mostly dominated by the MSME spaces, despite being arranging for all the I would say advisories being released by MHA, the workers are not getting reporting to work, with the simple reason that we are getting free money, free food. Why should we come and wait for the same money which we are getting for free? So that's a new angle altogether. So you may have an empathy and you may have a realism, but somewhere down the line, I think both of these, how do you balance it out? That's a nightmare for organization to happen. But on the
absolutely.
On the same point, Rajiv, on the minimalism, I would say, on the how I would say you see that the industry being changing in terms of focusing more on the must-haves and nice-to-have. It really appears that it would be a must-have for some time to come. What are your thoughts in terms of consumer behaviors being changing?
So I think the whole distinction between want and need is going to be further refined. So I think, given what's happening, and I fully endorse what Avinder has said, that there is a paradigm shift with respect to the consumer behavior. Exactly, we don't know what will ultimately it manifest into, but directionally, I think we are seeing the same stuff, that consumers will take a lot of time to come back to luxury goods, and but also from a minimalistic perspective, I think everyone will ask these questions when they're buying something. Do I want it or do I need it? And the moment you have that kind of questions, a lot of consumer behavior changes will happen, because there is a big distinction between want and need. Earlier, we were buying stuff because it used to gratify our ego or whatever. But today, we don't have to show off because you're going to work from home. Probably you can only show off to your your family, nothing beyond that. But having said that, those companies who are able to innovate and have ability to provide a product or a service which enhances the capacity or the capability of an individual will thrive. So I think the technology will definitely play a great role. AI, AV, VR, and many other technologies will definitely play a great role in making an employee more productive. I think post-social distancing, and this is going to continue and then people have also realized the benefits of it, right? That how beneficial it is from a health perspective. I don't spend 2 hours, 3 hours, 1 hour on the road. I only go to office if it is required. I now have collaboration tools. My organization has provided me the processes and systems so that I don't have to physically meet people to get things done. And then on top of it, automation of SOPs, and they've got so many other things. So I think minimalistic approach, I think, is there. People will distinguish between want and need. And I would assume that many of these malls and cinema halls and all these, I think this will see a major shift in consumer behavior.
I think when you told, when you were saying in terms of the show off, my mind went to the marriage halls and the big North Indian weddings. And it's a real nightmare. The biggest nightmare apart from the travel and hospitality industries are them. Because even the jewelry from that perspective, because you can't show off. So at least the huge amount of sea change of consumerization and their behaviors would eventually be happening to us. Let me now move forward to the last segment, which is the employees related. And on that, probably, Avinder, I would ask you one question in terms of that the organizations over a period of time. I won't say for all, but I would say there are a good amount of organizations which have really sailed across till now, having employees which are more from a loyalty. They were with me from last so many years, so they are still continuing. And then they also have some level of a meritocracy. So how do you see that the balance between the loyalty and the meritocracy going forward? When we talk about manpower optimization, what are your thoughts around those employees which probably are not in the meritocracy, but probably in the loyalty? How organizations are going to deal it? Or in your view, probably that's not a big issue?
I think, Anshul, my personal perspective says that loyalty is going to be there and would command the respect as it is doing today. There can be rationalization of the manpower. There can be optimization of the manpower, keeping the productivity into mind. There could be a strong coming up of the AI and ML, which in any case would put a different pressure on the manpower or our employees. But for that, reskilling is there. But coming back to your direct question, as an employer or as a manager, I would still rate and still would like to balance between loyalty and meritocracy. Reason being, loyalty is something which is medium to long term. Meritocracy is something which has its own spikes. It gives you back, but the cost of replacement of meritocracy is very high. When the attrition happens, probably when you need to hire again and train again and making that person comfortable in the organization, it takes a lot of time and a lot of stuff goes. I would say this situation, the way we are going to through today, there could be rationalization, there could be optimization, but the balance between meritocracy and balance between loyalty will continue to be there. We definitely need loyal people, but definitely it doesn't mean that loyal people are not the meritorious people. They are, because over a period of time, they have remained with us, and we have, it's a mutual respect kind of a stuff where we, take care of each other. My bet would be that I would like to have this healthy mix even in days to come.
And probably one question, personal question from my side. In fact, many of the Indian businesses, and there's probably some people who would agree with me and some don't, and it's probably a very straight question. Majority of the boards today are more governed by loyalty rather than by meritocracy. How do you really feel that probably at the board level, are today's board capable enough to drive us through this and navigate the businesses through these challenging times? Isn't that the test of the board itself?
I think, Anshul, this in itself is a topic of discussion, whether they are capable or not, or whether they will be now capable, or were they ever capable. So you got to differentiate between a professionally run organization and a promoter-driven organization. The later has more loyalty concerns and loyalty on the board, and the former has more merit-oriented. But slowly and gradually, since the coming up of the new Companies Act in 2013, where where the independent directors were, made fully accountable and responsible. I already see that shift, that people are looking for competent directors on their board. So going forward, howsoever rationalization may happen, still the promoter-driven organization will have some share of the loyal people to be on board for a different reason. And to run the organization, they can always go to some independent and some qualified directors who will be on their board to steer them out of not only a crisis like this, but a general strategic or other crisis which business see every day. So probably this might shift the tilt a little bit between in the board on the merit side, because they really need some good people to steer the ship out of the troubled waters now. But eventually, once the sea stabilizes and when the ship stabilizes, on the board, in the promoter-driven companies, the loyalty is going to play a bigger role. And otherwise, in a professionally run organization, I will continue to believe that hardcore professionals and merit-based people are on the board.
Sure. So Rajiv, I would request you if you can share some last thoughts. But before Rajiv, you speak, I would urge our viewers on the YouTube who are live that there's a chat box over there. You can please ask, type in the questions you want. I'm being told that there are close to around 15 odd questions, and we have to pick up some of them. So probably if you could share more questions, and probably let's learn from these two biggies of Indian, I would say Indian captains of industry. Rajiv, your thoughts on the meritocracy before Sujata walks us through the Q&A round.
Okay, so I don't look loyalty and meritocracy differently. I think loyalty and meritocracy are part of the same coin. So loyal employees actually contribute extensively to the productivity of businesses. They are able to create value required to put in your businesses. And one of the most critical components of business, and these are, and loyalty and meritocracy, in my view, goes in hand in hand. So for example, NIF is a professionally run organization. We have a board which is pretty diverse. There is no controlling shareholder, and which basically puts a lot of kind of responsibility on the management as well, and ultimately on the board, to make sure that we have the right set of people. And it also ultimately depends on what kind of culture you are putting into the organization, what your cultural anchors are. So I look at it from our perspective, I think both loyalty and meritocracy go in hand, because we believe that if you're loyal and you are able to, they have the better chance of contributing more effectively for the growth of the company. Can't hear you.
Thank you, Rajiv. Thank you, Rajiv. I would say, and over to Sujata, back to you for fielding some great questions.
Thank you. I would like to thank Mr. Avinder and Mr. Rajiv for sharing your views on the the pertinent topic that was put up to you. We would be moving to the question and answer round. Prior to that, just a reminder to everyone that we have our next Qbinar scheduled for 8th of May at 4 p.m. And the topic is Boost Your CHRO and CIO Partnership to Succeed in Challenging Times. One of our confirmed speakers for this Qbinar is Mr. Vijay Sethi, who's not only the CIO, but who's also leading the HR and CSR front for Hero MotoCorp. We would also be inviting HR and IT leaders from a different industry to join us for this panel discussion that is on 8th of May at 4 p.m. So please join us for this. Now moving forward, we'll be starting with our question and answer session. I'll be posing the questions to the speakers. Just one note to the attendees that you will be receiving a brief survey, just a few questions that would be emailed to you. I request you to share your responses with us. That would help us in drawing out several insights, and these insights would be shared with all the attendees and would help us uncover, few more things going forward. So please be on the lookout of this survey and do submit your responses. So let's start with the questions. So one of the questions has come, which is a very interesting one. Mr. Vipul Dave, he has asked this question from Cosmo Films. He asks us that yesterday we have heard Reliance announcing pay cuts. So is manpower cost forefront of all other costs for organizations? So I would request Mr. Avinder to take this question up.
I too heard about it, that Mr. Ambani's group has proposed a 10% to 50% cut based on the kind of salaries they are drawing. But mind you, it is not that manpower is the only cost, but since there isn't happening anything on the revenue side, it's a complete shutdown. So probably most of the cost becomes fixed cost, you know. So be it be the manpower cost, or be it be your rentals, or be it be your electricity, or be it be X, Y, everything which till yesterday was semi-variable or variable has become fixed. So what you heard, or what we heard, is only about the cost cut on the salary part, but I'm sure every organization is looking at all other factors, be it be the rent, be it be electricity, be it be the spend on the marcoms, be it be the spend on other events and workshops. So each and every segment is being looked at. What has come out in the press is only the manpower optimization. So let's not get carried away that people are thinking only of reducing the salary part. All across the board, all the factors are being closely looked by all the organizations to make and get the best productivity out of these difficult times.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Avinder. So the next question to Mr. Rajiv from us, Ms. Saras Malik has posed this question from Artemis Hospitals. She asks, if normalcy takes more than 2 to 3 months to be regained, how organizations can be financially ready to cope with the scenario?
So thank you for this question. Combination of many factors. As we were initially discussing, that we all need as business leaders to make sure that our businesses survive. And for that, we need to do a very hard look at our businesses with respect to its cash needs and its ability to be a going concern. So it's a combination of what is in store for us as businesses over next 1 year. And we prepare for the worst, plan for the worst, and hope for the best. But that preparation means that if we believe that we'll run out of working capital in, say, 6 months, or we have revenue challenges, then we as in the organization need to sit together and make sure that we survive. But one thing which we all need to do as organizations, and in NIF and our group associate companies and our platform companies, the first thing we've done is to relook at the businesses of all our platforms and give a very hard look that in the event, if everything fails, so all revenue lines dry up, do they have necessary resources to survive over 3 months, 6 months, and 12 months? And what does it take to survive? Because as I mentioned in my initial discussion, that it's very difficult to build businesses. It takes years and years to build businesses. And if a wrong move or some unpreparedness could actually destroy businesses. And that's what we need to prevent. So my view is that plan. Look at all scenarios. And if you feel that there are challenges, then we need to look at resources. For example, I'm running out of capital, working capital over the next 6 months. What do I do? Should I cut my cost? Should I borrow more? Should I do both? Can I get my money, which is stuck with my debtors, and improve my cash flow? So there are many, many aspects which needs to be taken into consideration. But the foremost responsibility of any management is to make sure that we have survival kit ready and we implement it. Not let businesses wither and ultimately die. That's the most important thing.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Rajiv. So, Mr. Avinder, once again to you, in an optimistic scenario, which segments do you think will open up for new employment opportunities?
I think, of course, digitization or digitalization is going to be one of the sectors which is going to be on the forefront, which also means all your artificial intelligence and machine learning and all that stuff is really going to be the digital marketing, the what we are having today, the so-called Qbinars or webinars, and all that stuff is going to be the new sector where people should look at. Of course, some sectors like pharmaceuticals are going to survive this. Food industry, I'm sure, is going to survive this, and they are going to throw open more opportunities. But some of the traditional sectors will be struggling, which could be your textile, your cinema, entertainment, hospitality, automotive, and they will take, or reality for that matter, they will take some time to, come back to where they are, and that sometime is not something which is going to happen few weeks. It may take some quarters before they can plan their rebound, could be minimum couple of quarters. So, so something which is more related to digitization, minimization, value for money, and something which is out of the box and talking about products as service. So as we have in the plane industry, where you don't own planes to run the whole thing, I think that I already see a shift where, manufacturing will not be something which is product based. It'll be more to do with the service, where a complete value is given to the consumers, and not as just a product. So OPEX is going to be the new norm, not the CapEx kind of a stuff.
Okay, thank you. So one question here I actually want to pose to Mr. Anshul, especially when we are talking about, digital avenues are the areas wherein employment might see a more push or a boost in the coming time. So what are your views with respect to cybersecurity professionals, cybersecurity itself being a concern for organizations? Secondly, it becoming a good source of employment, or rather a front of employment. So your views on that?
Yeah. Thank you, Sujata. I think cybersecurity is going to be one of the areas wherein there are a lot of jobs being created, because as the businesses would go digital, the more the businesses go digital, so that means they are embracing good amount of technology. So it's not only cybersecurity. Cybersecurity is one of a small, I would say, bucket within the technology function. But the technology function overall would see a lot of piece in terms of the employment generation. But yes, I would say cybersecurity is over here. People and the companies would be more wary in terms of the corporate applications they are using currently, particularly in a scenario when majority of or probably the entire workforce of yours is working from home. So how are you creating some logical boundaries? In fact, one of the pieces which I have been hearing and I have been speaking often also is in terms of that there's too much of a social engineering also getting happening, because people are going to speak to your alumni, your friends. So how do you really control these? So technology is something which is a booming area, and cybersecurity certainly would be great. But overall, beyond cybersecurity, I think some of the areas wherein employment generation would see a lot of pieces is in terms of the reskilling perspective of the sunrise technologies. I think we should never forget the sunrise technologies. We have too many in terms of the AI, the ML, the blockchain, I would say, and we are going to see some great innovations around blockchain as a technology going forward. So I think these are the areas certainly which would draw a lot of employment.
Thank you. Thank you, Anshul. So, Mr. Rajiv, the next question is directed to you. So how can SMEs raise capital in strained fiscal situation?
I am the listener, Rajiv.
So I think their engagement with their lot of work has been done by the government and will be further announced. So we will see more announcements, and that's my hope, and I'm quite sure that this will happen. That the government will provide more credits to MSME and through the banking channel. So, so there's a lot of work done by many economists and business leaders who are basically pursuing with the government, and that I'm to some extent aware of it also, that the credit supports to MSME is must to survive mom and pop shops, because they are the backbone with respect to the employment as also with respect to the economic growth within the country. And you will, and the only way we can do this with MSMEs are that they need to plan properly, they need to rekindle their relationships with their banks and treat them as partners, and make sure that they also cut costs and rationalize their cost, but also relook at their business models. So for example, I have a small restaurant business. How do I make sure that that restaurant business, I'm not able to now host guests in my restaurant? Is there a way out to now work with platforms like Swiggy and try to create a better product for my community where I serve? Similarly, if I'm a small departmental store, how do I do it? So I live in Bandra. I can now tell you that all my purchases right now are online, not on Amazon. So all shops around my area have now created a phenomenal stuff through WhatsApp. I place an order in the evening. I would go at an appointed time. I get a message. I pay by Paytm, and those shops are not. Nobody can walk into the shops. The packets are ready. I just pick up the packets. Payments are all digital, and I come back. Now, these are the innovations which we all need to do as an MSMEs, and this is one of the examples, and there could be many. So what I'm saying is we don't have. So people have found ways, and Indian brains and Indian kind of might with respect to how to use technology is very important. So what I'm saying is that various ways to do this, specifically with the daily needs kind of businesses, restaurants, kirana walas, your day-to-day grocers, and you don't need Amazons there. You can serve much better to your community, serve your community much better.
Thank you. So, like rightly said, necessity is the mother of invention. So, Anshul, I think that is the note that we need to take. Let's look at a community-based approach. Let's look at all our partners within our network and see how we can survive this. Okay, so the next question to Mr. Avinder. Do you think China will lose its grip when it comes to manufacturing and support, and India will now become the new epicenter for it?
Very political question, but I would give my perspective here. I think India to replace China is not going to happen so soon. But China losing some of its base to the Europe and Americas, yes, that's going to happen. But am I going to get the benefit out of it? Maybe very little. Government is also making their best efforts to pitch India as a substitute to China. But if you ask me, I think countries like Vietnam, Taiwan, Malaysia are going to be more benefited, and immediately I see a lot of manufacturing shift happening to these countries. India, to be in that league, really needs to do some homework. We really need to cut the red tape and bureaucracy what we have. We really need to make some single window kind of approvals, which are very cumbersome out here. We really need to reform our labor laws. It's difficult, or it's easy to get in, impossible to get out kind of a situation with us. We really need to be, consumer friendly or investor friendly before we can think of replacing China. We are not on the same league, perhaps, we might get a little bit of share out of this changed equation. But my view is the countries I named are going to get the most of it. And we will really have to do a lot of homework before we get into that league.
Sure. So just last couple of questions. So just a reminder to our attendees, please fill in and submit the survey that has been emailed to you. Like I mentioned, the survey report with all the insights and discoveries would be shared with all the attendees and the participants of the survey. So moving to the last couple of questions, with the kind of shifts that are happening with regards to our lifestyle that have been forcefully introduced because of the pandemic, do you see way forward like this could make us, convert us into a more humane economy? Either Mr. Rajiv or Mr. Avinder, whoever feels most comfortable in answering this, can take it up.
I'll
Avinder,
follow
you
you,
want to go?
Rajiv.
Oh, okay.
I'll
All right.
follow
So-
Rajiv.
No.
So very quick answers I would request here.
I think so. That yes, the answer is yes. I think people, this experience, and I'm now talking from my personal perspective. I think working from home has really made me realize that there are two aspects of that need to be really kind of brought forward when it comes to my engagement with the world. One is what you said was empathy and the courage. And both have to be this is an experience we all are facing, but I think good will come out of it. It is a painful process. I think next 12 to 18 months are going to be very painful. But I think we as individuals, citizens of this country, citizens of the world will have a much better understanding of how do we take care of each other. Sure. And how do we make sure that we solve little problems and then a big problem gets solved. So I'm very much focused in trying to solve smaller problems, because I know that I don't have that capacity and capability to solve bigger problems, but at least I try to do and solve smaller problems. That can only be solved when I look at the problem empathetically and I have the courage that I need to do my best to solve the problem.
Sure. So a very quick response from Mr.
So I would also like to agree with Rajiv. I think in majority of the Indians by nature are more emotional than professional. So probably we understand these words like compassion and sympathy, but I see a little change here that this might turn into empathy, because we are ourselves seen that how things are going and what it looks to, or what it is to be in a quarantine, in isolation in your homes, when you got to realize how much it goes into doing the work. So probably I also see that overall the economy might become a little more compassionate and empathetic towards each other, because everybody is going to the same. And another thing I see is that a lot of top executives will now be hands-on as operational executives rather than strategic executives, because in this last 6 weeks and probably a couple of more weeks, which I already anticipate is going to happen, they have been doing a lot of operational stuff to put things in the right place. So they have been hands-on to tons of jobs which perhaps they were earlier delegating and were not looking at. So all this is going to create an economy which might be a little more human than what it is today.
Sure, thank you. So the last question to Mr. Rajiv here, recovery will take a long time. So what can firms do to protect their bottom lines and to maintain liquidity and capital resources? I know too many such questions have been posed to you. So
yeah, so I'll again, so one is to look after, so people should look after their employees, because at the end of the day, rationalizing costs is given, but it can be done in a humane way. It can be done in a proper way. And I think one of the greatest assets any organization would have is loyal and really hardworking employees who are, who ultimately work hard and do their job diligently. So I think if I have to do something, I would make sure that I'd keep the organization above water, do my best to make sure that the organizations or the companies do not go down. And for that, I need to work very hard with my team, with all my stakeholders in the organization, and find ways and means to survive over next 6 months, 12 months, and keep the safety and the security of my employees and our assets at the forefront. It's very important to, and then there's this debate going on between live and livelihood, and I can understand that. And at some point of time, there's a cost benefit for whatever decision we take. But I do believe that as an organization, we need to every day plan and see how we are able to survive this onslaught of an invisible enemy, and how do we make sure that businesses survive, in which case do whatever it takes to keep our employees safe, keep our assets in fit condition, and then opportunities will come up in next 3, 4 weeks, 6 weeks, 10 weeks. The opportunities will come, and then grab those opportunities quickly. That's the only way we can kind of come out of it, and have courage, as I mentioned earlier. Have courage that things will become all right.
Sure. So,
Sujata, I can also add something here,
sure,
even though you have not asked me, but I think this is my subject also, that I would also like to agree with Rajiv that it takes lots of efforts to build an organization, and our endeavor should be to do anything to everything to keep that way. And for that, I think the immediate step is that we should believe that we come out of the lockdown quickly, and then laying off and downsizing should be the last factor to be looked at. It should be round the corner, not to be seen. And certain objectives like skill development, flexibility, communication, gratitude, motivation, even to the extent of pay cuts. This is something which every organization should look at, so that they are able to take care of their employees, they are able to take care of their customers, they're able to take care of their small suppliers and dealers and retailers. We take them along, and I'm sure the turnaround would be far easier.
Sure. Thank you so much, Mr. Avinder. So we are at the end of today's discussion. I take this opportunity to thank all three, including Mr. Anshul Dureja, Mr. Avinder Singh, and Mr. Rajiv Dhar, for sharing your views and several insights. And also the main thing that you all three have shared is that, yes, we all need to show courage in the face of difficulty in these challenging times, and together work as a community, a professional or personal community, to come out of it. So thank you so much for sharing your insights with us. Anshul, over to you.
Thank you. In fact, I would just try to end it on a lighter note, and probably that's the reality of today. What is happiness? So I think we are also moving away from a little bit from the economy, I would say, and the financial perspective. So happiness was all around fancy cars, fancy clothes, and a lot of show-offs. But right now, I think we all are learning that it was all materialistic. I was speaking to one of the senior CFOs today morning, and in the industry, and pretty veteran, I would say 65 years of age, and he was talking about what's the topic. I was telling him this is the topic. So he was saying, okay, have you added Satyug in front of that? Manula Satyug, kehta, no, that's the best piece. So in Satyug, it was all non-materialistic and people were still happy. I think probably we are moving towards that, but I think it's a new realm of learning happiness in a new avatar. And with this, I would like to thank both Avinder and Rajiv. I think it has been really great of you spending last 90 minutes with us. And I would say fielded some tough questions, both from me and the audience. And I also take this opportunity to thank the audience to pose so great questions, I would say. And of course, last but not the least, Sujata, thanks for convening it wonderfully as always. You have become a very natural and normal on this.
Yes, with good backgrounds.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you very
Bye-bye.
much. Bye-bye.